Well, this is an experimental evening. I'm trying something new out on you. I mean, I just thunk it up on the airplane coming here. And so we'll see. So you have your little page here, your half sheet, the menu board. This is an audience interactive participation kind of situation. See, here's what's going to happen. You're going to pick what I'm going to talk about from the menu board. Some of these things are 1 minute. Some of these things are 10 minutes. There's all kinds of apologetic points and pointers and tidbits on evangelism and all kinds of things packed into this menu board. So you're going to pick what I'm going to talk about. And therefore, if the evening goes down in flames, it's your fault, not mine. You picked the wrong things, you see? There's some real dogs in here. You don't want to pick those. You want to pick just the right ones. Unfortunately, they're all cryptically named. So you're going to have a tough time. You're going to have to go by some sort of special divine inspiration of the Holy Spirit or some really good guessing. So that's how it's going to work tonight. In fact, let me show you how it's done. Okay, you go, and this is a free-for-all, by the way. Really, I want to see wrestling matches in the pews over who gets to choose. So you shout out, number 1, Godless in Seattle. Do that one, you see? And if you're able to shout past the din and I hear you, we go with that one. This is a... Whoa!
Number 9, the lunch witch.
Okay, I'll just do all of them. All right. The lunch witch. I like the lunch witch. That's a good one. But I'm going to initiate people gently. I'm starting out with number 1 just because that makes a lot of sense. It's number 1, right? That was my example, but you people definitely have the way this is going to work. Okay, number 1, Godless in Seattle. I got a call in my Biola University office, and 2 guys in Washington State had started a Christian club at a very secular school. It was a town near Seattle, called Olympia, the state capital. And by the way, Washington State is one of the most unchurched states in the country, according to sociologists. I think Oregon probably gives them a real run for their money. But nonetheless, it's fairly godless territory. And to think that a couple of guys had started a Christian club on a very secular campus kind of blew my mind a little bit. I heard what they were doing. Turns out these guys were business majors at the school. They happened to be Christians. They discovered that if they start a club, they get access to Associated Students' money. I mean, they just give it to you. These guys were walking around with fistfuls of cash, wondering what to do with it, you know? So their idea was, hey, let's bring in some Christian speakers and writers and thinkers that we read and like to hear about, and we'll bring them in and let them talk. Maybe we can even get a little crowd out, you know? And I'm on the other end going, yeah, that's probably not going to happen. But hey, look, I'm willing to support you guys. You guys are crazy enough to do this. I'm crazy enough to come up there. So they bought me an airline ticket. They fly me up to the Seattle airport. They picked me up in a car, and they're rushing me down Interstate 5 to Olympia. Turns out they had some sort of little lunch event planned. So they zoom down the 5. They get off in Olympia. They go about a mile, and they pull into some college parking lot right next to some building. And they hustle me in the building. Turns out they were late for this thing, you know. So they hustle me in the building, walk through the doors, and there's a wall over here. Something caught my eye on the wall. I look over there, and there's a big poster on the wall, about yay big. And it's my face. It's a gigantic face right there. But that's not all. There were flames under the face. And the title of the event was Come Barbecue the Christian. The moment I see this sign, a guy walks by with a wheelbarrow filled with barbecued chicken wings with foil over it. You know, you can smell them. And he's walking by. It turns out there was a whole barbecue theme to this event. They'd ordered barbecued chicken wings from the best barbecue place in town. This guy with a wheelbarrow disappears around a corner. My hosts lead me the same direction. Professors and grad students are coming out of their office just attracted by the smell, you know, like wafting down the hallways. So we walk in around the corner, and there's this lecture hall. It's jammed with people. Every seat is taken. People are standing up in the back, and there's undergrads there and grad students and people in white lab coats. There's janitors. There's people's moms there. I guess this sounded like a lot of fun. The little plan was, I guess, to tear some Christian apart, in front of the group and then celebrate by eating chicken wings, So soon as we got in the room, things settled down quickly, and the little organizers, who were marketing majors in the business school, by the way, and they got a good crowd out. They knew what they were doing, but they hadn't really thought through the whole event. One of them goes, okay, we're going to start the event now, and here's what you do. You ask questions to this guy for an hour, and then we eat wings. And he goes away. He just leaves me standing there. So I gave a quick, just opening couple of comments just to get things rolling. And I said, okay, let's hear your questions. So I've been doing this a while, a lot of years going to secular college campuses. And the questions have changed over time. The questions have changed. They've gotten stupider. I'm not kidding. It was kind of terrible, the questions. It was as if everybody had gained all of their theological knowledge from reading the Da Vinci Code, And the whole atheist club for the campus was sitting there right in the front row. They're sitting right there with T-shirts on to identify themselves. And they were having trouble asking a decent question. I had to help them ask a harder question. I remember one guy asked me a question. I go, that would be a lot harder for me if you were to formulate it this way. And I reword it and I hand it back to him. Then he asks me that exact question. And I go, oh, that's a hard one. Let me see. It was just kind of weird. Even weirder was the fact we got about halfway into this thing, and they were struggling with their Da Vinci Code style questions. And then it just kind of stopped. They're just staring at me. I'm staring at them. Because they got to ask questions to earn the wings. I'm not letting them off the hook. And, think about it. This is a college, and this is an opportunity, an open forum. There's some sort of knowledgeable Christian up there. There's a chance to ask big questions about this life, the afterlife, the soul, God, Jesus, Buddha, you name it. Ask the question, and nobody had questions. So that was kind of disappointing. They're just all kind of staring. Now, there wasn't any motion out there. I did see one guy in the middle, and he's nudging his neighbor, and I could kind of read his lips. He's saying, ask the question. And the guy's going, okay. And he looks around, and he starts to bring his hand up. Of course, I saw that motion immediately. I went, you. And he goes, yeah, well, do you believe in baptism? Strange question for that forum, And I said, sir, not only do I believe in it, I've seen it done. So I stole that from G.K. Chesterton, by the way. So, but I say this thing, thinking of G.K. Chesterton, and there's this beat. And then the entire place just starts cracking up. I was so glad the whole place was cracking up because it was just a big game of gotcha up until that point. They're trying to make me look stupid. They're, roasting the Christian or whatever they're doing. And until that point, they were just trying to get me. It wasn't any kind of actual learning experience. But once they started laughing, it's like the shields went down. And you could just see they're sitting back in their chair just a little bit more relaxed. And hands were going up a little easier. And they were asking me questions, I'm not kidding, like, so are you really an academic and a Christian? How does that work, Did you grow up in a Christian home? No. Were you dropped on your head as a child? Help us understand this Christian thing, So unfortunately, that part of the time only lasted, 15 or 20 minutes. And but I got a couple of chances to get the gospel in, and it was kind of fun in that respect. But, the hour was up, and I had to release them to the wings. And so there they go, Oh, and oh, my goodness. A lot of these people were pretty sanctimonious during the Q&A, Well, you ought to think of this. But you should have seen them going for the wings. There's people in walkers being shoved aside as they're heading for the wings. And clearly there were a lot of architecture majors or structural engineering majors in the group. The reason I know this is because they gave them little plates for the wings, But they were able to build towers of wings, with flying buttresses for support and drawbridges. Wasn't quite that bad, but they had these big mountains of wings. Oh, had this funny ending too. So people are over there getting their wings, and I was over here on a little stage talking to somebody in the front row over here. They just wanted to ask a question, so we're chatting, and I see some motion from the wing table. When you're on a secular university campus, you have to use your peripheral vision. You really do. You have to see what's coming at you. So I noticed somebody leave the wing table, and they disappear out of my vision. They're coming round the bend. Turned out it was a woman. She had a big plate of wings. She's eating one. She's got some, schmutz on her face here. And she's coming at me. And she goes, and I'm talking to her. She leans over me while I'm talking and goes, hey. I turn around, and there she is, like right there, So I kind of step back to get some personal space, and she's still eating the wing, And she's like, okay, here's my thing. My thing is, there aren't enough women in the Bible. Like I'm in charge of that, So it was so weird that I thought she was a plant from the drama department. They'd sent her in to torment me, And so I'm thinking, oh, yeah, this can't be for real. So I'm like, oh, I totally know what you mean. And she's like, yeah? Always had a wing. Yeah? I go, yeah, like the three wise men. Should have been the three wise women. She's like, yeah. I'm like, that makes so much more sense, because if it was three wise women, they would have arrived on time. Because women ask for directions and so on, And she's like, yeah. They would help clean the stable. They would have helped deliver the baby. And they would have brought practical gifts. They would have brought a casserole and a baby blanket and a pacifier. And she's like, yeah. You get it. And she walks away. Okay, what's the lesson of this ridiculous story? The lesson is this: what in the world are we afraid of? You go to the heart of darkness, a secular university campus in Olympia, Washington, and that's the best they could do? Look, anybody in this room could have done an excellent job in front of that crowd answering some of those questions. My goodness, I'm glad you're here just ramping up. You only have to stay a couple of steps ahead of those crazies, and I think you can do a really good job. So, there is nothing to fear. And it really boggles my mind as my colleagues and I travel around the country, doing apologetics conferences and so on. Christians are racked with fear. They really are. You know why? Because they're afraid if they live big for Jesus or present the gospel to somebody, somebody's going to ask them a couple of hard questions. And they forgot to read that Josh McDowell book, And so they feel left out and hopeless. And all they need to do is ramp it up just a little bit. We've got all the answers that we need, to really make a nuisance of ourselves for Jesus. We've had them all along. We're kind of like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, We've had the ruby slippers on all along, and we just need to learn how to, click them together 3 times, say the right words, and watch the magic happen. So we've got the goods. Let's just learn it and practice using it and see what the Lord will do with it. Next one. Ow. It does help to be in the front row. I should have advertised that. Creative smuggling. This is a simple little idea in that we've done amazing work in the evangelical world in Christian philosophy and in apologetics and biblical studies and history and archaeology, all kinds of important disciplines to both establish and defend the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. But we've been a bit pathetic at being on the cutting edge of the creative enterprise that can communicate these ideas brilliantly and really move the culture. We haven't been very good at it. I became a bit passionate about this when I wrote a novel. I'd never written a novel before. I didn't know if I could. I knew I could tell a good story because, I told my kids some of the craziest bedtime stories on the planet, So I kind of honed my game there. So I wanted to try writing a novel, and I had an idea for one, and so it turned out pretty well. No, I take that back. It turned out fantastic for me. Other people are much better novelists, but this thing was terrific because I'd written some academic books in the past. Yeah, nobody reads them. I mean, you know what happens to an academic author? You know, we write this brilliant book, you know. Oh, we sweat blood over the research and the writing and getting it just right, you know. We think of all the critics' responses and we answer them in the book. It's just this thing's really going to make it. And what happens is you find a publisher. It happens to be a major university press. It comes out. You get a package in the mail. There it is. You're so proud. But what really happens is only the major research university libraries buy this book just to make sure they have every important book in their collection. And then it gets mailed to that research library. A librarian takes it, puts a stamp on the spine, marches it down to the deepest, darkest, and dankest part of the library, and files it away on a shelf, never to be seen by human eyes again. So much for all that blood, sweat, and tears, you know. So I wrote a novel. And it's fun, and I wanted to, and I had people in mind when I was writing it, you know, who I thought it would impact. And the thing's been going strong for like 10 or 12 years now. And I get emails every week still over that book. Somebody read it for the first time, and they're contacting me to find out, ask some intriguing question, or how did I get this idea, or who was it, you know, modeled after, blah, blah, blah. It's having an impact on Christians and non-Christians alike. We need to learn how to be creative. And there's many ways to do that, too. I don't know if any of you saw the movie. It came out, at least, you know, like 15 years ago now, called The Exorcism of Emily Rose. It's a horror movie. But it was directed by Scott Derrickson, who's a graduate of the film program at Biola University, you know. And he's done a lot of movies. Every movie has a wonderful Christian theme embedded in it. And so did The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Did you know that you can actually discover God through the dark side? You know, the demonic world is real, and it helps actually establish the Christian view of the world. And that's exactly what Scott Derrickson did with The Exorcism of Emily Rose. So it is a horror movie. I don't know that I could recommend it to everybody, but if you have a stalwart constitution, you might be able to handle it, you know. But it'll show you what a really creative director can do to move the culture, and that's great fun. Next. See? Right there. What'd you say? Hey, right there? 11. Pudd'nhead Wilson. This is a short one. Pudd'nhead Wilson was a character in the writings of Mark Twain. You know, Samuel Clemens, that guy. Pudd'nhead Wilson, my favorite line in everything that he happened to say in one of these books was this. Faith is believing what you know ain't so. Faith is believing what you know ain't so. Now, I think for about 100 years now, that has been the major way people have approached faith, both outside and inside the church, and it's just woefully wrong-headed. Faith is believing what you know ain't so. In fact, check this out, just to give you a modern rendition of this. This comes from a guy named Bart Costco. Bart Costco is an engineering professor at the University of Southern California. And he wrote an op-ed piece in the Los Angeles Times. He was annoyed that the government was giving some money to faith-based organizations to do some good work in the community. It just annoyed him that they were faith-based institutions, right? And so he decides, as an atheist, decides to school us all in what faith really is. And so he gives a definition of faith at the outset of his op-ed piece. Here's his definition of faith. Faith is unwarranted belief. Faith is belief without evidence, or despite evidence to the contrary. Faith occurs when a person believes that something is true, even though he suspects it's false. It takes large doses of such faith to support the very existence of casinos, psychic hotlines, astrology columns, mall Santas, and most organized religions. This is not what I signed up for. In terms of Christian faith, for goodness sakes, what a disaster. Faith in Christian terms is trust. I trust Jesus. Do you know why I trust Jesus? Because I have every good reason to trust him. Every good reason. through personal experience, but also through the facts of history. He was a real historical figure. The facts are clear and compelling that he was killed by a Roman crucifixion team and that he came back alive on the third day exactly as the New Testament describes. And the evidence is clear and it's compelling, and God was very generous with this evidence, leaving a trail back through history that's really dramatic. So this is just a ridiculous notion. We really got to nip this in the bud. In fact, we may need to just change our vocabulary for a little while to see if we can't correct some of this and not use the word faith so much. Let's maybe use the word trust because it just doesn't have that connotation. When we say belief or faith, what people believe, you're saying, is that you're talking about blind leaping. Faith, to the modern mind, equals blind leaping. They think all we do is go out to the edge of the religious abyss, we close our eyes, and we leap into it. There's no rationality whatsoever involved in us, in our people of faith. By the way, around Easter time, you turn on the evening news, and people have gathered in St. Peter's Square to hear a message from the Pope, and the newscaster always says, "The faithful have gathered in St. Peter's Square tonight." But I know what they mean by the faithful. The lunkheads who really believe this stuff. The people who need that kind of nonsense. Oh. Anyway, another one. 13? 6. You didn't? 6? Oh, you don't want 6. No, but we're doing 6. Here it is. 6. This may send the evening, downhill fast, but here it is. I went to school at UC Santa Barbara, and it's right on the ocean. It's the most beautiful campus. Well, one of the most beautiful campuses in not just in California, but in the United States. It's amazing. I mean, just to have a piece of property right on the ocean and so on. And so to be able to go, my wife was so happy when I decided to go to UC Santa Barbara, not some barber college in Iowa. She was really happy about that. Because it was just beautiful all the time and so on. So our department in religious studies was very big. There were a number of professors and maybe about 50 graduate students. It's one of the top programs around. And every other week we would have a colloquium where all the grad students and all the professors would get together, not just in our department, but from some associated departments around campus. And it was always a really stimulating time. One term, they decided to open up this colloquium series to the graduate students, whoever wants to deliver some of the research that they've been working on. And so it was kind of a prize to get a slot. There's only maybe about 4 or 5 slots available, and I applied, and they gave me a slot. The research I had been doing had to do with the interaction of science and religion. And so I was actually looking at what I was calling the modern creationist movement and trying to make sense of it from a religious studies standpoint. So I'd done a lot of research, kind of sociological style stuff and typical research too, and that you do in such a case. And so I was prepared. I had a really good presentation to give at this colloquium, and they chose me to do it, and I was pretty excited, but pretty nervous about the whole thing. I must have prayed as much as I prepared. I'm not kidding, because I just knew this was a make it or break it time. And it turned out to be because just coming up to that colloquium session, in one of our graduate seminars, the head of the department who was leading this seminar slammed his fist on the table and said in front of the other grad students to me, "Hazen, you're nothing but a flat earther." Word had gotten out that I was some sort of Christian, that I might even be some sort of young earth creationist or something, and they were just like, who let this guy in here? So this truly became a make it or break it moment for me in grad school. So, like I said, I prepped well. And I prayed myself up to the hilt. The time was coming. In fact, it was the day before the event, and I went into the room where this normally takes place, and it was a dingy room. It should have been great. It's got a whole panel of windows on one side of the room that look out on the ocean, for goodness sake, but they were so dirty you could barely see what was out there. Half the light bulbs were out in the room. The paint was all messed up and all this. So I went in the day before, and I just really started scrubbing the place. I think I was just kind of burning off some nervous energy. I was changing light bulbs. I washed all the windows. I cleaned up all the chairs and rearranged them. I went out and got some giant coffee pots and brewed some really great smelling coffee. So there were like 2 big pots in there going. And so time came the next day for the colloquium to take place, and grad students and professors are descending on this room, and they could smell the coffee down the hall. And so I saw them turn around, and they went to get their coffee cups. So this was in the afternoon, like about 3 o'clock, and everybody's just like, you know. And I wanted the coffee there because very often one of the top people in the department would sit like right there in the front row. And usually he was the colloquiarch. He would introduce the speaker. He'd sit down and he'd fall asleep and snore right in the front row. I just couldn't have that happen. So he's drinking the coffee too. Everybody's just abuzz. And there's light in the room, and the windows were open, the ocean air is coming in. There was just this whole different feel about what was going on in that room. And it just showed me how important setting up the environment is. And so those of you who do behind the scenes work to make something great at your church or in some ministry, you know, kudos to you. There's a lot that goes on that helps a ton. I saw it myself with my own hands this time. So I did my presentation, and for the first hour, I gave a very religious studies presentation of the whole science and religious thing. And the second one, I just said, I know some of you look puzzled. Let me put on the white lab coat of the creationist scientist and see if I can't convince you of their position. And so for an hour, I just went through all the arguments. They were stunned. They'd never heard anything like it. The guy who slammed his fist on the table, just a few days before, comes up, shook my hand afterwards. He goes, I had no idea there was evidence like that. You know, with evidence like that, I could become a creationist, you know? And I became the department's darling after that, you know? At Hazen, he's a fundamentalist, but hey, you know what? He's all right, you know? And the Lord blessed me in that program. A good word to you. Those of you who go to hostile programs or into hostile environments, the Lord will be with you. Just run headlong into it and watch what He does. I actually still, according to one of my old professors, I hold the record for winning scholarship money on that campus. I applied for everything under the sun. I won all of it. Every day I was getting a check in the mail. I'm like, oh my gosh. Am I going to be arrested for receiving too much scholarship money? It was kind of insane, you know? But looking back on it, it was the Lord's blessing. He just wanted to bless me and show that He was with me in what I was doing, you know? So that's the end of that one. 13. Which one? See, okay, I'm going back here. Which one? What did he say? I'm hard of hearing in 1, 3. Got it. They really do want to kill you. So it was Thanksgiving up in the Bay Area, and my sister-in-law and my wife, my sister-in-law, and some of my wife's family were up there, and mostly San Francisco-style liberals, not Christians, and it was Thanksgiving Day, and everybody had a great dinner, a couple of glasses of wine. Everybody's sitting around this living room, and somebody had this great idea to let's all just share what we're thankful about. And so people were going around the room, and it came to me. And I just shared that, hey, being a Christian, I'm just so grateful to God. I can't believe what He's done in my life this year, la, 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 la. Very simple, straightforward message. Didn't mention a word about anybody except myself and what God had done, and that I was extremely grateful to Him for what had happened in that past year. My sister-in-law, sitting across the room, whose house this was, shouted, "You mean I'm going to hell?" Never said a word about you or hell or anything else. Another vignette. A friend of mine when I was... A friend of mine at another school where I was teaching apologetics, he comes up, I got the best idea. I'm going to start a coffee house. a Christian coffee house where we have guys like you and these other guys come in and as speakers on a regular basis, we'll be covering problems in homosexuality and the abortion issue and the resurrection, you name it, man. We'll be dealing with it. And I think it'll be just a perfect environment for people to just hear this, because people will be drinking coffee and they're mellow. And I go, dude, man, do you have enough money for the insurance you're going to need for that place? You see, there really is a devil out there who wants to destroy us. And he's making lots of people upset with our basic gospel message and the truth. Don't forget that. Be on your guard. Go to God regularly for protection, that he might go before you, because there are people and disembodied beings who want us destroyed. And don't take that lightly. Next one. Which one? Two. I like two. That's a good choice. Miracle on the Dixie Highway. There's a big university on Dixie Highway in South Florida. It's called the University of Miami. Go Hurricanes, right? And I got an invitation to come there and give a talk on reconciling science and faith. I'm the guy to do it. And this very secular campus. The Christian group on campus invited me in. They wanted to see if they couldn't get a crowd out. And just like the chicken wing people, they decided food might be the best way to do it. So they ordered lots of pizzas. They advertised it all over the science research part of campus. And they drew a pretty good crowd. It was almost, full, this decent-sized lecture hall they had. They had a big stack of pizzas in the back. And I was supposed to interact with them on the question of reconciling science and faith. So the crowd's out there, and I was about to come out on this little stage, and I was peeking at the crowd from behind a curtain. And I always like to size up a crowd before I go out, just see if I can detect any vibe, And so I'm looking at them, and I had an idea. Again, I don't, I have the spiritual sensitivity of, plankton or mushrooms or something. And so I don't know if I'm ever hearing from God. I probably do once in a while. I just don't know what it feels like. Other people tremble and they feel, I don't do that. So I get this idea, perform a miracle. All right, I will, And so the group sponsoring this, they introduce me. I go out to the edge of a little stage, stick my toes over it, and I'm talking to them right up close. And I go, what a joy to be with you. I'm so glad so many of you thought this was an important topic, because it is. Is it in any way possible to reconcile science and faith? Well, I've got some ideas for you, but I really wanted to start it off in a special way. It dawned on me that it could really help our conversation if I started out this evening by performing a miracle. It's funny, because the kind of nervous laugh I heard over here, that's what I heard in the lecture hall. They go, yeah. But these were mostly engineers and stuff, and they're like looking, they're plotting little trajectories to get out of the room, grab pizza, and escape, And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to perform a miracle. So I went out to the edge of the stage, and I start to loosen up. Because everybody knows you got to loosen up to perform a miracle. I mean, you don't want to hurt yourself, right? It was so stupid, really. So I'm loosening up, getting settled. I open my eyes, and people are leaning forward. Because, and some of them aren't blinking. It's a little weird because they're afraid I'm going to do something like a backflip or a magic trick or something, and they want to catch me doing it, And I look over here, and there's a gal right there with a camera. And I go, are you going to try to film? Are you going to try to photograph the miracle? And she goes, I go, all right, good luck with that. Oh. So the next day, I'm not kidding, on the front page of the Daily Hurricane newspaper, man performs miracle in science classroom. That was the caption. Man performs miracle. So I just get settled, pause for a moment. Other side. Thank you. Yeah. So some guy in the very middle goes, "You're a moron." I totally deserved it, but I go, "Oh, I'm so sorry. That was probably disturbing to you people to see a miracle like that." You probably don't see that very often on campuses where suddenly, boom, an arm goes up like that. And they're like, what are you talking about? No, really. Clearly that was a miracle, right? I mean, you're all a bunch of science students. You know Newton's laws of motion. I was a body at rest, right? And according to Newton's laws, I am not supposed to move unless acted upon by an outside force. And there was no outside force. There was no invisible fishing line around my wrist pulling it up from the rafters, right? There was no wind blowing through here, right? Nothing like that. Just wham. It's a miracle. They're like, you're an idiot. Some people were walking out, and I thought maybe this was the wrong thing to do. Maybe I should wait for the vibrations before I go with an idea like this. And I said, well, look, clearly then, I'm going with the scientific laws. The burden of proof then is on you to demonstrate that it was some sort of natural occurrence. But according to Newton's laws of physics, boom, it's a miracle. And, so they're kind of yelling at me. And I lost the crowd. I couldn't really hear what anybody was saying. But then a guy stands up, and this was very helpful. I mean, this guy was out of central casting, science guy, He was very tall, balding, he's clearly a professor of some sort, had some, glasses on, pocket protectors in his long lab coat, and he was so tall that it was like an event, him standing up, bop. And he's right over there, and so he goes, I think I can be of assistance here. And you could just see the students turning around, and they were like, oh, it's Professor so-and-so. He'll take care of this. And so he goes, I think I can be of some help here. Let me explain what happened when his arm went up. Then he actually goes through this amazing rendition of the cascade of electrochemical activity that takes place, when an arm goes up. There's C fibers firing, and there's axons, and there's dendrites, and there's synapses with acetylcholine, and there's a line of nerves going down cervical gap X, and it runs down to the deltoid muscle, and when, something happens, and potassium's released, and actin and myosin cross over, the deltoid contracts, and the arm goes up. But he plodded through this, just very methodically for felt like, maybe a minute, 90 seconds, and all the students are going, yep. There you go, religion boy. How are you going to deal with that? And so when he was done, I go, that was tremendous. Thank you so much. Can anybody fill in, his partial explanation? Because clearly, he's just describing parts of the miracle that took place. And because how did it get started, for goodness sakes? He didn't explain that. How did it get started? So then I really lost them. They're just yelling at me. I can't hear a thing that's going on. But there was a gal sitting right next to the gal at the camera, and she's yelling louder than the rest, and she's kind of pointing her finger in a funny way. She's going, what's going on? And so I finally tune in enough to hear her, and what she was saying is this. It was a very strange thing to say. She goes, you did it. You did it. That was her explanation for the thing. And I go, wait, what did you say? She goes, you did it. I go, everybody, shh. Listen to what she has to say. Tell them. And she stands up and turns to the crowd and goes, he did it. He did it. And I go, she's right. I did it. You see, I am not my body. I'm tightly associated with it, and I can do all kinds of things, and so can you. You see, what wasn't accounted for in that marvelous rendition of the physiology of an arm going up was how it all got started. You see, I engaged in an act of the will, which is not a material activity. It's as real as can be, but it's not material. It's not physical. But it's real. And so I said, let's go up, arm. All that stuff Professor so-and-so here talked about kicked in, and my arm went up. You know what? There actually is an explanation, but there's no scientific, physicalist explanation for that. You've got to introduce some other ideas, and they might not be physical, like I engaged in an act of the will. It was off and running the rest of the night. It was great fun, but it just showed me how important it is to just take like a ball-peen hammer and a little punch and go pop, and just punch a hole in their worldview. It doesn't have to be a very big one, and then watch everything else unravel. And that's what happened that night. By the end of the night, there was a microphone here for Q&A, and there was a line of young men, I'm not kidding, a line of young men holding laptop computers. Half of them were attempting to convince me that this laptop computer was in some way alive. I mean, these kids needed dates bad, you know. All right. Somewhere over here. 10. Which one? 10. Let's see. Yeah, that ain't bad. Okay. Your gun rack overfloweth. Let me read 2 Corinthians chapter 10 to you. Paul writes this, "For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds." Now, this is amazing. He's telling us here we have access to some weaponry that has divine power, or in the Greek would be like a powerful through God for the destruction of fortresses, right? They can demolish strongholds. I don't know about you, but I want to fill a gun rack with these things and just drive around, hostile spiritual enclaves. I love this. For though we live in the world, and he's just talking about the physical world in general. We live in the physical world. We don't wage war as the physical world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the physical world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. I know what you're thinking. This is prayer. Well, I don't think prayer is divorced from this by any means. I mean, this is the Apostle Paul. He prays without ceasing and all that stuff. I'm sure he just bathes things in prayer. So that's certainly involved. But I don't think he's talking about prayer here. And I think we can know that simply by understanding what these fortresses are. He's not telling us directly what the weaponry is. He's telling us what we're destroying is. And by implication, he tells us what the weapons are. He says in verse 5 of 2 Corinthians chapter 10, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. It's as if there's this barrier here between human beings and their knowledge of God. And this barrier is filled with bad arguments and ridiculousness from the world. And we have weaponry to blast through that barrier and get a pure, clean vision of who God is. And it's incumbent upon us to use those weapons. But if that barrier is made up of all kinds of terrible argumentation and faulty facts, our job is to provide good arguments and the right facts, to do our homework and present our case. That is our weaponry that is powerful through God for the destruction of those barriers or those fortresses that block our knowledge of God. So consider 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 3 through 5, a very friendly verse for you as a Christian apologist. It's not just a spiritual warfare verse. It is, though, but it shows that doing apologetics is a very important part of spiritual warfare, blasting through those barriers that block people's knowledge of God by using excellent argumentation, good facts, and sound reasoning. Next. 5. Boom. Sunken living room. I already told you I went to school in Santa Barbara. I'm originally from Orange County. That's a couple hours, 2 or 3 hours south of Santa Barbara along the coast, depending on the traffic. And we make regular trips down to Orange County because that's where my wife's mother lived. And so, we'd throw ourselves in the car and drive down there to visit. One day we were on our way, and we decided we ought to pull off the freeway and stop and see my brother Steve. My brother Steve is my oldest brother. He's a gay man who cuts hair in West Hollywood, in Beverly Hills. And, we're great brothers. He knows where I stand on the whole homosexuality thing. And, we dealt with all that, but still we have a good relationship. And so we're driving alongside. We should stop by and see Steve. We got a couple of extra hours. So we pull off the freeway. We go to his house, and we go to where his street is, and it's just jammed with cars. Now, it turns out that this was the day of the Gay Pride Parade in West Hollywood. That wasn't on our calendar, so we weren't aware, So still, we finally find a parking place, and we march over to his house. And we walk in, and my brother sees us, and his place is jammed with people, you know. It's kind of an afterglow for the parade, you know. So we pop in, and my brother sees me come in. He goes, "Hey, everybody, it's my fundamentalist brother from Orange County," you know. You know. By the way, in terms of California, being from Orange County is actually a little bit worse than being a fundamentalist, you know, because it's like a conservative county where John Wayne, you know, lived and all this stuff. And so because it was a kind of open environment, you know, in other words, I was the stranger in the group now. It was all gay and lesbian people, you know, all folks from West Hollywood. And because I was on their turf, they felt much more comfortable to just come up like and engage me in direct conversation. I mean, one guy, he got the whole, in my brother's sunken living room. Do you know what those are? You know, they're kind of funny, and it's a little California piece of architecture back in the, you know, like the 1950s. This sunken living room with a fireplace in it and so on. And I'm in there talking to this guy, and he's asking me this question. So help me understand, what is it that you know, conservative religious people have against our lifestyle, you know? I go, okay, now, are you asking like me, Craig Hazen, citizen of the world, you know? Because if you are, I mean, my inclination as just part of this culture is simply to say, you know, live and let live. You know, I don't want to bother anybody. And he's like, wait a minute, well, am I getting something wrong here? Aren't you some sort of, you know, fundamentalist or something? I go, well, see, now you're getting at some different questions. I mean, you're kind of getting at what does God think about all of this? He goes, yeah, well, maybe I am. I go, well, look at it this way. If there is a God, right? If there's a God, and if he, she, it, or they, I want to sound open. If he, she, it, or they actually had something to say about human sexual practices, would that mean anything to you? And he goes, well, they say, you know, hemming and hawing, like, oh, well, you can't know that. I go, no, just humor me. It's a hypothetical. If there is a God, and that God has spoken clearly to human beings about these things, would that make a difference? And after a few more rounds of that, he finally goes, okay. Yeah, because I reminded him, we're talking about a God who can speak galaxies into existence, you know, that kind of God, you know. And so if that kind of God has something to say about human sexual practice, would that make a difference? Finally, he says, I suppose it would, but, you know, how can you know such a thing? Boom, my turf. You see that? I mean, originally it's, what do you guys think about our lifestyle? And this is a technique I use on college campuses all the time too, because your talk on a college campus can be derailed immediately the moment somebody stands up and says, so you're against homosexuality, are you? You know? Oh, that's a terrible situation because the shields go up, everybody tunes you out, you know, and so we need diversion techniques to get around those questions so we can get back to the most important questions. So I like the would it make a difference issue. So would it make a difference if God actually has something to say about human sexual practices? And so once I said that, and the guy said, yes, I guess it would make a difference. Well, then I said, well, that's the thing that's most important. Then is there a God, and has he spoken really about all kinds of human events and behaviors and practices? And he goes, yeah, but you can't know that kind of thing. I go, well, let me give you some good arguments as to why I think God exists, and actually why I think Jesus is the very Son of God. I think you'll be surprised. And so I'm talking, and other people are listening. They're starting to gather around, and I'm getting kind of backed up, and I step up on this fireplace hearth. So I'm in there like preaching to the sunken living room, you know, taking questions. My brother walks around the corner. He sees this scene. He's like, oh, gosh, what is this? You know. So I didn't make any converts, but one guy on my way out, he goes, you know, you fundamentalists have a lot more going on than we give you credit for. So that's as good as I could do. Next. 9. Okay, 4. 4 is just fun. It's short. 4 is about recapturing. 4 is about recapturing that time when you first knew the Lord in a really powerful way, and nothing could stop you. You know, people become Christians around you right and left and so on. I became a Christian as a senior in high school, and within a year, I didn't have any non-Christian friends. They'd just become Christians. I don't know if it was through my witness or not, but it certainly had some sort of influence. But one of my friends, he was a few years older than I. He was a butcher by trade, and he owned a hearse, a black hearse. And he had painted flames on it, and in the back it said, turn or burn. And this guy gets into this hearse, and about every Friday night, he'd come roaring up to my house, slamming on the brakes, going, "Let's go!" Basically hop in the Jesus wagon. We're going out do-gooding, So we'd all hop in the Jesus wagon. This guy would stomp on it, and we just prowl around looking for people we could help. We saw a stalled car, somebody with a flat tire, this guy just skid, to a stop, and we'd all leap out. We scared the daylights out of people. But oh my gosh, I don't know what it is, but just that craziness. More people came to know the Lord through that craziness than any time in my life since, And I reflect back on that. I go, I just got to find that mojo somewhere because, man, I got to go buy me a hearse, paint some flames on it, and head down the freeways. Of course, these days I'd probably be shot dead within a few minutes, but nonetheless, we had a great time in those days. So it's about recapturing that excitement of being a Christian. And noticing we weren't dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's and having the best arguments. We were just out there doing what we thought was the Lord's work, and the Lord blessed it no matter how crazy we were, and we really enjoyed that. Next. 14. Russia. I'm going to save 14 till the end. Remind me. 3. Oh, 3, okay. Poolside Bride. Friend of mine was a furniture designer by trade. He fancied himself a bit of an engineer. He never went to engineering school, but he watched a lot of, science shows on cable channels and so on, and fancied himself kind of an armchair scientist. And we'd get together regularly. He was a very interesting guy and actually liked the furniture he designed. So we'd get together and talk. And almost every time we'd finish talking, we were leaving, he'd have to make this wrap-up statement that really bugged me. And the wrap-up statement was this. He goes, Hazen, we had a great conversation, but I think it really boils down to this, I'm the science guy, and you're the religion guy. I know what he means by that. I'm the guy who reflects carefully on all things rational, I'm the guy who wants to see the laboratory experimental data come forth. I'm the rational person. You're the guy who wants to blind leap into the religious abyss, In some ways, that's what he's talking about. So it grates on me. I thought I was making progress with him, and then he ends it, yeah, you're the religion guy. You're the superstition guy. You're the blind leaping guy. So he's getting married. Invites me and some of my friends to his wedding. It was a lovely affair at a local church. And then, as is the case in California, we all hop in our cars and drive to some reception thing. This happened to be at a country club. And so we all pile out. My friends and I, we find this lovely table out by the pool. Most of the people attending the wedding were inside the pavilion, just right next to the pool. We were out by the pool. Found some umbrellas, having a good time. And we noticed the bride and groom were up inside. They'd had a few glasses of champagne. They're gliding around, visiting their guests. And we honestly weren't paying that much attention to them, but they finally glided outside to greet us. They come up to our table, and my friend, he kind of ignores my other friends at the table. He kind of looks at me and goes, Hazen, so glad you're here. Man, we've had a lot of great talks over the last couple of years. I go, yeah, we have. He goes, yeah, but I think it really boils down to this, don't you think? I'm the science guy, and you're the religion guy. I really shouldn't have said this at his wedding. But I just blurted it out. I said, so tell me, is it wrong to torture babies for fun? It was just kind of shocking. I just blurt this out. So tell me, is it wrong to torture babies for fun? Well, he's thinking about it. He barely understood what I said, but he's like, the wheels are moving, and his new bride is holding onto his arm here, looking up at him. And it sinks in what I've asked, and he's thinking about it. That's not something you're supposed to think about. Of course it's wrong to torture babies for fun on your wedding day, you say, okay? But she's holding on to him. Well, then she's worried, like, why is he not saying something? He thinks it's wrong, she says, you know. And then she starts hitting him like, tell the man it's wrong, you know. So now, I don't remember exactly what happened after that, but I remember a couple of months later, you know, we got together again, and this guy's like, he's going, oh, man, you really got me at that reception. I didn't know what to say. What was that about? But I got to tell you, it dawned on me later that was a trick question, because if I said, yes, it's wrong to torture babies for fun, I would be admitting that there's something I can know about the universe that science really doesn't tell me anything about. It's weird how he came to that conclusion, you know, in this sticky situation. But that's right. You see, there's moral knowledge. There's real moral knowledge. And we know it as surely as we know any fact of science, that it's wrong to torture babies for fun. That's knowledge. That's not my opinion on the matter. We can truly know that that's wrong. And so he discovered that he could know certain things about the universe, even though science can't tell you a darn thing about them. Next. Number 9. Ooh, lunch witch. A friend of mine at church, he comes up to me, he grabs me by the arm and goes, Hazen, you got to help me. I go, yeah, what? What's going on? He goes, there's a witch in my building at work. I'm like, what are you talking about? No, really, she's the real deal. You know, she doesn't like ride on a broom and all that, but she's just dressed all earthy and has flowers in her hair and, you know, just talks kind of weird, you know. I go, well, good for you. What do you want me to do? He goes, you got to talk to her. I go, okay, this actually sounds like fun for some reason. And so I'll tell you, you set up lunch, you know, and we'll have lunch with the witch. And so he sets it up. So on this given day, around noon, I show up in this building, and I'm in the lobby, and there was this woman dressed kind of earthy with some sort of flower wreath in her hair across the lobby, and I'm like, I'll bet you that's her. My friend's nowhere. He's a no-show. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I went over and greeted the person. I said, I think we're supposed to have lunch together, but I don't know where that friend is. She goes, yeah, I haven't seen him either. I go, well, do you want to eat lunch and talk? She goes, yeah, okay. So we go someplace really nearby, and she orders up some vegetarian delight, and I get some beefy, meaty thing, you know. So we begin to chat, and honestly, she had a lot to say, and so I actually am a very good listener. I'm a bit of an introvert, believe it or not, and so sitting there listening is actually just fine with me. And so I'm listening while I'm eating, and she's going on and on about the practices in the Wiccan community that she's part of, is especially their moral practices and how they decide, you know, those kinds of things. And I'm listening, and it's very relativistic in terms of the moral approach. So I'm listening carefully while I'm eating, and she must have talked for 40 minutes, and some of it was pretty interesting. I actually learned something about life in that kind of community. But after about 40 minutes, she goes, well, I haven't let you say a thing. What would you like to say? I go, well, I don't know. But let me ask you one question. What would you folks in the coven say about the Holocaust? Just one question. What would you say about the Holocaust? And I'm looking at it across the table at her, and you can actually see in her eyes her entire worldview collapsing, going. It's just one question. She's like, I don't know. I go, because it seems to me that would be a very difficult issue for the kinds of things, the kind of moral relativism you're talking about. I mean, can you actually stand out and condemn that or not? I'm just curious. Help me understand that. Notice, help me understand that. Not, your view is wrong. No, help me understand how you work, how you process that. Well, she never processed that, and nobody in her covenant ever processed such a simple question in the modern world that needs to be taken care of that way. So just one proper question. This lesson is actually about two things. Number one, asking just the right question at just the right time. And number two, listening to buy yourself the right to ask a question. You listen carefully. You show you're interested. I actually am interested. That's why I went into religious studies. I actually find it fascinating what these people think and believe, and I can listen for a long time, so I'm pretty good at that part. But you kind of buy yourself the right to finally ask that question, and they are kind of obligated to really pay attention. Plus, listening shows that you're interested. It helps build a relationship right there, and it can be very helpful. So be very slow to speak and quick to listen. It can be very helpful in those situations. In addition to this situation, almost the exact replica situation happened on the set of Roseanne. Right? You know Roseanne? You know, Roseanne, it's coming back, I guess, in the spring. Did you know that? So if you remember the Roseanne show, my twin boys played Jackie's baby on that show for 4 seasons. And yeah, strange. And so the cast and the crew and the writers got to know me as like the religion professor, you know? And so they'd always bring me their interesting religious ideas and conundrums and so on. And I had the same thing happen with one of the writers on the show. And I just asked her, so what did your guru, she had a particular guru. I said, what did your guru think about the Holocaust? And she, of course, was of Jewish extraction, so was almost everybody sitting on the other tables listening, They were all leaning in, wondering what she was going to say about that. But again, just listening carefully, I kind of earned the right to ask that question. And then I watched her worldview just collapse right there. But she was a resilient sort. She went out and got a whole new worldview for the next week and tried it out on me. Next. 8. What do we got here? The golden tool. This is helpful. It's really the golden rule of apologetics. The golden rule of apologetics is ask of them as they ask of you. Ask of them as they ask of you. This is something I tell people who are just starting apologetics for the first time so that they can go out and use this material right away. I go, you think you need to go out and have all the answers, don't you? Yeah, I think so. You don't. You simply need to know how to ask a question. In fact, you don't even need to think up the question. You simply take the question that's been asked you and turn it around on them. Ask of them as they've asked of you. I learned this when I first became a Christian. I had this uncle of mine. He was a physicist, the smartest guy in our immediate and extended family, He had like a PhD in physics. I think his job was building bigger and better hydrogen bombs or something. But, he fancied himself a scientist. He certainly wasn't a Christian. And I was like the smartest kid of all the cousins, so he had kind of hope for me that I was actually going to go somewhere. Then he heard I'd become some sort of religious nut, So we're at his house for Thanksgiving dinner, and I have a couple of cousins, his sons there. And his sons weren't too thrilled about their dad. He kind of browbeat them a lot. And so if there was any kind of argument that broke out, they'd be on my side no matter what side it was, So we're eating turkey dinner, and my Uncle Rob goes, so I hear you become a religious guy, huh? Oh, that's funny, yeah. So what do you think about the Bible? And so I was a young Christian. I didn't really know this technique, but I used it right then just because I didn't really have anything else to say, and I learned how powerful it can be. I go, well, I suppose I have a lot to say about that, but I'm curious, Uncle Rob, what do you think about the Bible? Oh, then you watch the craziness fly. I am not kidding. He starts babbling about, the guys in the lab, we talk about that a lot, And I think it's pretty compelling that the Bible was mostly written by inebriated monks in the 1500s. I'm like, oh, the Lord has delivered him into my hands, I didn't know much in the way of apologetics, but I could take on the inebriated monks in the 1500s. And so I just started going after him, and my cousins were cheering me on. We had a grand old time. But it's very effective. When somebody brings you a question, so you don't really believe in God, do you? Well, help me understand. What do you think about God? And notice, number one, it shows that you're interested in them. Number two, it buys you some time and gives you some intelligence, right? You're collecting intel when they start talking because you get to find out their position. And then you can very gently respond. And by the way, it helps to relax you too when you say, so what do you think about the Bible? You don't feel compelled to give this brilliant 5-point answer. You simply want to get a conversation going. And maybe you can continue later, but it's really magical. And I call it the golden rule of apologetics. Do I have time for one more, Dr. Stewart? 14. One more? Oh, 14. 14. Let me read this to you. This is for you. It's from Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov. And for those of you who have turned out for this week to really run this apologetic marathon, this is for you. It's Dostoevsky talking about one of the brothers, the Karamazov brothers, Alyosha. And here's what he says about Alyosha. It must be added in a way, Alyosha was indeed a member of our younger generation, which means that he was honest, that he believed, demanded, and searched for truth, that because he believed in it, he yearned to serve it and give it every ounce of strength. He was spoiling for immediate action. He was prepared to sacrifice everything, even his own life, in an act of supreme devotion. Unfortunately, these young men often fail to understand the sacrifices, that the sacrifices of their own lives may be the easiest of all sacrifices. Much easier, for instance, than giving up 5 or 6 years of their seething youth to hard study, to the acquisition of knowledge, which would increase their strength tenfold in the service of that same cause and in the performance of the great works to which they aspire. But to sacrifice those few years to study often proves too much for them. Not for you. You're dedicating a whole week to this kind of study. God bless you. It will make a difference. It'll increase your effectiveness tenfold in what you want to do for the kingdom of God. Heavenly Father, bless my brothers and sisters as they seek to know you better through your scriptures and through the field of apologetics that you've ordained that we master at least to some degree. And I pray that would happen. I pray that everybody would have a fresh answer to give to those who are asking, that we'd fulfill that command by the Apostle Peter. Fill us with your Spirit. I pray that you give them health and energy this week as they seek to serve you by learning these great truths. In Jesus' name, amen.